So let's take a little bit closer look at cost leadership. Now, cost leadership is based on, again, having the lowest cost of production, distribution, supply, etc. So how do we get low cost? How does that come about? Well, you may have heard of the word economies of scale somewhere. Economies of scale basically say that as we grow production, as quantity produced increases over time, we can see here our average cost per unit decreases, which is very nice. We're growing our activity, we're growing quantity, and the cost per unit decreases. And in this zone, the cost curve, this is our average cost curve, we have what's called increasing returns to scale. We're getting a benefit, and at some point we can continue to grow, and well, the cost per unit doesn't go down anymore. It goes down very slightly. It remains constant. Now, how does this happen? How do we have average cost per unit decreasing as the number of units increases? Well, this can be to specific types of production. We have volume and large volume, and to produce the large volume we have large machines, and sometimes larger machines offer us a lower cost per unit. Types of plants and equipment we use in our production. You sometimes see large industrial manufacturing plants being used, and this allows for a lower cost per unit. Also remember that as fixed costs are distributed across a larger quantity, the fixed cost per unit is decreasing. Employee specialization allows us to decrease our cost per unit. The more we're specialized, the more we're getting better at a specific task, and the better we master a task, the lower the cost. Volume and overhead cost per unit, as I just mentioned, remember that we have fixed costs in a business. As quantity increases, then the fixed cost per unit is smaller. Now, what's interesting is that we have diseconomies of scale. Diseconomies say that, hey, look, at some point, we're going to increase our quantity, but our costs are going to start rising, and we're looking at this area of our average cost curve. Sometimes we can only be so big. We can't just continue growing and growing and growing forever without seeing something happen to our costs. And we have diseconomies of scale because of decreasing returns to scale. Well, why does this happen? Sometimes because of physical limitations of production. Cement kilns, what's used to make cement, and kilns used to make pottery, for example, can only be so big. You can only have production be so big. The production process has defaults if it gets too big. We also have what's called managerial diseconomies. As you grow your production out into the higher levels of quantity, it gets harder to manage. We also have problems of worker demotivation. Well, we can have specialization. We've got it here. We can see, well, specialization offers us scale economies, kind of like Ford did with his production line process. Well, if you have people doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, they tend to get demotivated. And so we have decreasing returns to scale. The cost per unit eventually starts to rise. We also have a question of distance. Distance is a simple issue. Imagine that you have units of production in a geographic area, and they're all separated. And they're serving their local markets that are around them, for example. Well, we could save money. We could bring them all into one centralized area of production. We can make it a big unit of production, and we would serve our local markets that are all out here. Well, this creates another problem, is that if we're producing everything centrally, we now have to ship our products further out. And because we're shipping further out, we have increased transportation cost. So sometimes this transportation cost may be bigger than the benefits we're getting from centralizing our operations. So there's a lot of things to consider. We can also have cost leadership because of learning and experience over time. So what we see here is that as we produce, and this is very important, as we produce more and more quantity over time, the cumulative amount of what we're producing over time, well, we've done it more and more over time, and what's going to happen, our cost per unit is going to fall. We're going to get more experience in producing something, the cost per unit falls, and we lower our cost per unit. Now, this is great. We're getting better at doing things. We're improving our work methods. Just bear in mind that to get these high levels of cumulative output and quantity over time, we may need to increase marketing expenditures to get there, and that costs money. There's some other factors that can go into cost leadership. Differential low-cost access to factors of production. A great example of that here is Silicon Valley. People that start their operations in Silicon Valley have a differential low-cost access to knowledge and partnerships and networks, and this gives them a competitive advantage. Oh, pardon me. Another thing we could have is technological advantages not linked to scale. For example, a company that uses the latest technologies available to them. And we can have low costs linked to product design. And for example, the life cost of a product and the use cost. We've designed a product that is low cost over time in its use and in design. There are potential disadvantages to being the cost leader. You may learn first and achieve certain experience before your competitors. This may give you a lower cost. You've started the learning process early, but maybe your competitors can learn from your mistakes and enter late. So cost leadership may exist for you to start, but if your competitors can learn from your mistakes, they may be able to follow you into the market and take advantage of your learning. Another reason is technologies. Technologies here may be linked to some competitive advantage, but that may be only short term if your followers, if you're a first mover, maybe your followers can get even better technology. And the fact that you moved first, well, you've sunk your money into a technology that's become outdated and you can't change it quickly. So we have to be really careful about cost leadership strategies. Sometimes being a first mover may not be advantageous. Now, cost leadership, we've mentioned VRIO in the past. Does a resource add value? Is it rare? Is it inimitable? And does the organization support our resources and capabilities? Cost leadership can provide us VRIO resources. Those that are most likely to be rare, the R of VRIO, are learning curve economies, especially in emerging industries. If we have differential access to low-cost factors of production, and some protected technologies can be rare. Are they inimitable? Can somebody copy them or find a substitute for these rare things that we've created? Again, differential access to low-cost factors of production may be sustainable over time. It really depends. There may be licensing arrangements here. Protected or complex technologies offer us a cost advantage that are rare and may be difficult to copy over time. The more complex they are, the more difficult they are to copy or to substitute for. And learning may be inimitable if history is required for learning. If you have to start at point 1 and go to point 2 and point 3 and point 4 and point 5, and you just can't jump in and leapfrog somebody in the learning process. If everybody has to go through the same learning curve, well, you may actually be better off starting and you'll achieve cost leadership, and it's going to be difficult to imitate. Let's move on to how we exploit this. low cost allow us to obviously be lower than the average competitor, which is over here, and we have a lower cost. We have two options here. We can have the same price as our competitors. The average price of the market is here, and we can have the same price. We can also, though, so we can be here, we can also have a lower price than our competitors and be what's called a proximal competitor. We're not selling the same price, we're selling a little bit less, but we have about the same profit as our regular competitors. A differentiator obviously can charge a higher price, can have higher costs, and still make a profit, well, because they've created additional value, and we'll talk about that next. But just bear in mind here that low-cost leadership does not mean having a lower price. In this case, yes, I'm providing a close, approximate service than the standard competitor, which is over here, but it's close to rivals. The benefits have to be close to rivals. If I'm way out, I can't do it. People will say, no, I'd rather pay a little bit more and have what I expect in a certain service. Differentiation is another way we can be competitive and offer an advantage in a marketplace. Differentiation is based on uniqueness, offering something unique that other people can't offer. And once I've created uniqueness or perceived uniqueness, and that's extremely important. Sometimes brands offer a perceived uniqueness, although the product itself may not be different at all. Perceived uniqueness allows us to charge a price premium, and customers will pay more because they have perceived benefits from buying something. So remember that this is all perceived. The features, the attributes, the performance of the product all depend if the consumer thinks they're different. We can get uniqueness through linking value chain components. We can add uniqueness in distribution. We can add uniqueness in supply chain. We can add uniqueness in our operations and come to a certain service product combination that is different than our competitors. We can also have differentiation because we were the first mover. Sometimes customers and consumers will pay more. We're the oldest school in the market. We're the first provider of a certain service in a city. This offers perceived value. Oh, if they've been around for so long, maybe that's because they're the best, and so people will pay a premium. Location, obviously, in many markets offers an opportunity to differentiate, to be different than. You're the person that's closest to the customers. You've got something that nobody else can get, and this allows you to charge maybe a higher price. Links with other firms. Maybe you're offering something in partnership with a supplier. For example, a restaurant says, hey, you know what, we're offering Starbucks coffee with our meal. That would be a nice factor to offer to your customers. It allows you to differentiate. Obviously, it depends if somebody else can copy that. If you have a various product mix, if a store offers multiple different products in its retail space, it allows customers to have one-stop shopping, and this is a nice opportunity, a nice way to differentiate. We have more products than our competitor. Come see us in our store. Brand, obviously, is a way to differentiate. We mentioned this before. And product complexity and customization. If you can produce a customized product for your customer, meets their specific needs, well, they'll probably pay you more for it. Now, this is all linked to what we call the total product. And the total product concept is pretty basic. Is that when you buy something, let's say you're buying a phone, a cell phone, well, there's the core or generic product. It's something I want to pick up, I want to be able to make a phone call with, and it serves a purpose. The expected product today is something a little bit more. When I buy a phone, a cell phone, I expect it not only just to provide me with the ability to make a phone call, it also offers maybe certain features expected. I expect this. It's the minimal purchase conditions. I expect that my phone has a warranty. I expect that if it doesn't work, I can take it back. I expect I can put a SIM card in it, and maybe some other things. If we go beyond the expected product, then we start to maybe differentiate our offer. We go into what's called the augmented product. Things that customer has not thought of. These are features that allow us to be different than the competitor. Cell phones are a really good example of this. In certain markets, particularly in Japan, customers like discovering. In fact, there's many hidden features in phones, and the challenge of the buyer is to find the hidden features. This is the augmented product. We've not thought of things. We like seeing surprises, and these surprises are great for us. The danger with surprises is that if we've got, let's see if I can come in here. If we've augmented our product here by adding things here in this space, what's going to happen is the expected product zone is going to become bigger. It's going to move out and take the space of the augmented product. If you provide your customer with a surprise, they'll pay more for it, but they also expect it next time. And that's it can be fun a challenge to deal with. And lastly, the potential product. These are things that are unused opportunities and ways you can differentiate your offer. Now, differentiation in VRIO, is it possible? Are we creating inimitable value? We're not going to talk about rarity. Obviously, rarity is from uniqueness, and by definition, differentiation is unique. So hopefully, if we differentiate our product, it's rare. It's adding the R factor of VRIO. What about inimitability? It is possible, and you can see here that we have a lot of different ways that we can create inimitability. It's a hard word to pronounce. But again, all of this depends on how well it's done. You know, you can only have a location for a certain amount of time. Maybe you have a long-term contract, but at some point somebody may bid to buy the space you have, or the rent may go up. Who knows? Your reputation can exist, but can also be destroyed if you provide low-quality products after a certain amount of time. First mover advantages do exist, but they can be eroded over time. So inimitability is possible for many of this, but it's sometimes hard to achieve. Now, what about focus strategies? Now, focus strategies are looking at niche weaknesses of firms with a broad strategy. So we say, hey, there's a grocery store chain, or McDonald's, for example, a hamburger chain. We can compete, have stores everywhere, but maybe I can compete better by focusing my activity and not trying to be everything that McDonald's is. So I'll look at maybe some of the weaknesses that McDonald's has. One of the weaknesses McDonald's has is they have a large menu offering. And because you have a large menu offering, well, you have a lot of different tools, different machines in the restaurant, different recipes. You have to maintain that menu, and that can be a disadvantage. So by serving a specific market, we're not covering a broad scope of activities or a broad scope of customers, and we may be able to do a better job at it. Cost disadvantages, for example, a cost advantage can be achieved by maybe narrowing down our focus. As I just mentioned, McDonald's serves a whole bunch of products. Good example here is a store, a chain of hamburgers called Rally's. Rally's is a chain of just hamburgers. They sell a very, very limited menu. They have no seating. You drive in, you get your hamburger, and you leave. Because they had a limited production, a limited menu, they had very small human resources, you could actually get a hamburger fried and shake at Rally's for like $3, which was like impossible for McDonald's to do. And so they were able to achieve a cost advantage, which is really kind of cool. They were serving that niche market. We can also differentiate by serving a niche market. Here you've got an example of Curves. Curves is a women-only exercise facility. They're often in downtown areas, just like other exercise facilities, but they've got special machines, they've got special interiors. For example, there's no mirrors inside of Curve's women's only exercise facility. They've designed specific exercise workouts for women. Everything is oriented towards women, and thus allows them to differentiate to that niche. They have specialized knowledge and mastery of their clientele, their client base. Success of this focus strategy is based on a few things. Obviously, you have to have distinct segment needs. Women have specific needs, for example, for Curves, and we can clearly identify women from men that want to exercise at Curves. Distinct segment value chains. Here, probably Rally's has a unique value chain proposition. The way it makes hamburgers, the whole process for delivering value is very unique. And viable economics. We can actually make profit having this niche strategy. Can you be both a cost leader and differentiator? It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough to do. It's risky, and it's pretty rare. It may be possible if you have separate business units. For example, Air France and Transavia operate two different types of business models, and that seems to be working pretty well. Some innovations are allowing us to be a low-cost leader and differentiate. Total quality management was such a revolution at the time. It allowed us to decrease costs and provide higher quality. Internet retailing innovations are also aimed at offering lower costs and maybe higher quality. Competitive failures, if you're in the middle, if you're stuck in the middle trying to do both cost and differentiation, well, you may succeed if others are doing the same thing and failing at it. So if your competitors are doing worse, and remember, competition is a relative game. If they're not succeeding, you can probably succeed even though you've got a disadvantage. And if you're dominating an industry, if you're the big player, you've dominated an industry for a long time, low performance can persist, and you can still win even though it's not the best. So again, this all comes down to relativity. You can be playing a game that may not be the best game to play, but as long as you're playing it better than other people, well, you'll win. Please be careful, as the two are very hard to combine. If you try to differentiate more and more your product, typically we have higher costs from differentiation, and a low-cost strategy won't work. And low costs often mean generic products and homogeneous products, and so you lose your differentiation. It's pretty tough to do. So another thing that's nice to see is that I mentioned before that if you have low cost, it doesn't mean you have low prices. Well, Cliff Bowman went and said, well, what if we were to look at strategy not at cost but at prices? And so he developed what's called the strategy clock. And so it basically positions people on a price and perceived benefit quadrant. What we can do is we can look and see where different companies position themselves in this quadrant. First off, we can position up here a company that's got the average price. We can see they're literally in the middle here. They've got average price, but they've got high perceived benefits. So here we've got a situation of differentiation, high benefits, but with a very common average price. This is a typical game played by a company trying to come into a market. Hey, I'm going to price the same as my competitors with a little difference in what I'm offering. Now, this probably can't be sustained for a long time because your benefits are high, but your prices with everybody else, your high costs of differentiation won't be able to be paid for a long period of time. So you'll probably move on to the next position, which is differentiation with a price higher than the market average. So your price is going to rise, and you maybe lower your benefits just a little bit, or you may want to enter here and just move to the right. A third position then would be a focused position. We have high benefits and high price, so we're clearly in the high benefits, high price range. And these are differentiation strategies. A low price strategy range would push us down here, where we have a clear low price and average benefits. This is low price with standard features. This is the proximity type of positioning we've seen before. Another option here would be a hybrid strategy where we have high benefits and low price. This is pretty tough to do. I'm trying to basically differentiate and have low cost. As we said, pretty tough to have the hybrid strategy. And obviously we have here the low price and low benefits. These are the no frills types of positions like Ryanair and EasyJet. And that leaves this entire area over here, non-competitive strategies, high prices with low perceived benefits, which just doesn't make sense. How are you going to convince somebody to pay more for less? And that just doesn't seem to exist. The only way it's potential is if you have some sort of lock-in and your customers can't escape you, and you force them to pay. And again, that's like really tough to do. It's forcing somebody to buy something in a free market is almost impossible.